Hello, everybody.
Well, hi.
We are back. It's been 7 weeks, 8 weeks,
6, right? Something like
6,
that.
7, almost 2 months.
We
So
traveled. There's a lot of stuff that happened. We traveled. We went to LA for the seminar,
for the
for the
seminar and the study,
and the, oh yeah, and the study and the
yeah,
seminar, and then you went to France
we did.
for the coaches week.
Yeah,
And
there,
then
and
we
then we
moved
came back, and
houses.
then when we came back, we moved houses. So
No,
this is what the background is different. We have a new house. The
yeah.
gym is better, so we're gonna do a tour of that. At some point, we're gonna show you, and then the beach is about 100 feet that way. That's the videos you've seen. We can go. We take an empty sandbag, fill it up on the beach, and then do crazy stuff, which will be a video about coming up as well.
Oh really?
That is
We're gonna
cool.
do
Yeah.
that? Oh,
Well,
that's
yeah,
cool.
because I want to show them. Like you just grab an empty sandbag. Let me show you what to do.
Yeah.
Find some sand
Yeah,
somewhere.
it's
Find a
cool.
sand dune, and it's
It's
horrible.
I'm still recovering from Thursday. My
Yeah,
hammies are
those are
sore.
those are amazing workouts.
The house is great, but we really rented the house for the location and the gym
The
space.
gym and the gym space.
It's
Anyway,
really badass. Anyway, doesn't
so
matter.
I have a bunch of podcasts to make about the seminar, how it went, about the study, about all of that. Before we do all that, that trip was really good because it has allowed me to frame anxiety in a workable way. What do I mean by
Yeah.
that? Is not just theory, but how to approach it in a practical aspect for you, for your clients, for all that. And also is what I want to create is a framework for the months, years to come about how we're going to go at the PTSD aspect. And by the way, panic attacks and anxiety are different things and cannot be necessarily, should not be joined in the same sentence because I'll explain, but there's an entire thing there. So I have a set of
There's
podcasts coming on the anxiety subject, but I want to go also at, and you'll understand what I mean as we go through this one. I want to talk about the training, but I want to talk about the carbs versus panic attacks and all that stuff in the next few podcasts.
yeah.
For this one, I want to establish a framework for anxiety. So
And for that, he has to oversimplify a little bit,
always,
but that
because the answer is
yeah.
always it depends. So to establish a framework, I am going to oversimplify a bit. Understand that I'm going to talk somatic versus cognitive, but those two things are obviously meshed together. You cannot separate them. For the thought experiment, right, for the sake of the conversation, I'm going to split them just so that we can make things a bit simpler. So,
digestible.
yeah, on the somatic aspect, what I saw during that study, and is something I mentioned in previous podcasts, was that idea of the heart beating hard versus fast, right? The heart can beat slower or faster, but it can also pulse blood faster into the system. And that's equivalent to the strength of the heart, basically. So turns out Dr. Nasser Ahmadi, who I work with for the study in Los Angeles, was a cardiologist before he was a psychiatrist. And so this is why we do a lot of measuring, like the cardiovascular system with the finger thing that doctors use. And for example, we had one of our people during the study who has like an 8% cardiovascular, percentage reading, which is extremely low, as you can imagine, the worst he had ever seen.
What is also around like what would a normal person's
Or you're getting at
score?
40, stuff like that.
Okay, it's just to
It's
give
not
it.
100%, it's not what you achieve, but the lower you are, the less you are. It's the resilience of your cardiovascular system. And it's not just based on whether you're out of shape or not. It's also a measure in a way of oxidative stress, because when oxidative stress shuts down, it shuts down everything. And the cardiovascular system is highly receptive to all that because it is the first hierarchy. It's the first two hierarchies, actually. So you understand that client that we saw started at 8%. Within 2 sessions, we're at 25%. She was at 25% not because she got in shape in 2 sessions, but because the therapy is helping her mentally and opening up specific things and reducing the oxidative stress in a way that better her cardiovascular system right away. So it's a marker that we use, but it's not just getting in shape. It's the overall health of the system. The reason for that is, I don't know if you guys remember the podcast about all the hierarchies of the nervous system, is that the first two is the heart. First is the heart itself, and then it's the blood pressure coming out of the heart. Like how hard is the blood pumping that out?
Yeah.
So I asked him about that because of my whole idea about the heart has to be hard. And it's basically the stiffness versus elasticity of the heart was what I was trying to describe to him. And he's like, yes, this is actually so the heart can be conditioned or can be strong, but they're not the same. Beating fast is not beating hard. Those are different
Two
things.
different
Yeah,
things.
and those are different hierarchies. So the one we're interested in is the heart beating hard, pulsing
Interesting.
the blood faster into the system. So that actually can be measured through HRV. The problem with the HRV is that the ring that they make is a ping a minute, which is not enough during, for example, a burn question, to know exactly what happened and when did you quit mentally in
Yeah.
the middle of. Because, you know, like on the sled, like the first is, but the second one, that moment where you quit, we need to know exactly at that moment what happened, right? And a ping a minute is not going to do it. So with UCLA, we are creating a ring that will get us a ping every millisecond
So would you
instead
have
of
to think
every
about like
second.
an aura ring type of
Yeah,
thing?
it's exactly what we have, but it's a medical grade, and it's a ping a millisecond instead of a ping a minute, just so that we can actually read HRV in the middle of a workout, and that's gonna give us all the necessary indication as to when the person quits, what happened, and all that stuff. It's to measure the difference between fight and flight, really. But
Wow.
what we're gonna see is that the resilience of the heart is equivalent with strength, basically. This is what we're going to see. So it's an entire, it's a different concept, because if you see from a somatic perspective, the strength of the heart, what are we talking about? We're talking about the capacity to handle an acute stress. What do I mean by that? For example, Wim Hof, right? You jump into a pool of freezing water and your heart just goes completely nuts. But we all been there. The heart beats fast, but it's not that type of hard thing. It's more the heart beats very, very hard in order to get the blood out because of the vasoconstriction due to the cold, and you know, you start to lose your breathing, you start to go like this. All this is part of the cardiovascular system that has a very, very strong reaction to the cold. But I think what they're trying to build, the resilience they're trying to build in the Wim Hof system, relates to the strength of the heart, not the conditioning part. Again, I'm oversimplifying, but you get the idea. Not the like. It's not the idea of, oh, your heart needs to beat slower. No, 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 no. And it's not that your heart is too strong either. What we're talking about is resilience. Can you go to a point where your heart beats very hard because it needs to pump the blood very, very fast, and not freak out and control that and everything? And for most people, actually, it's a very uncomfortable feeling, because it's a feeling that they never have to face.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we don't go into fights anymore. There is very few scary situations outside of the ones we make up in our own mind. Know what I mean? We have air conditioning, heater, cars. We sit all the time. We have plenty of food. When was the last time you had to fight for food with a predator that could kill you? Know what I mean? So, like, not fear, but like a true fight where that matters. Most people, their fear is one thing happening in their life, maybe two, but it's not two things a day. I mean, it's like we had 100, 200, 500 years ago. Those are not the same lives. And so what we have lost really is resilience, but not just cognitively speaking. We have lost resilience somatically speaking. And by that I
Okay.
mean that we cannot handle a specific stress to the heart anymore. So you see that with people that warm up forever. For example, instead of going into Fran, which is a 2 minute warm up, a 3 minute workout when you're really, really good, 5 minutes for most people. If you're in 2 minutes, then you're exceptional, right? But it's an under 5 minute workout, and yet people will warm up 45 minutes for it, right? Because they're trying to get their mind there, they're trying to get their body there. So what they're doing is they're taking to get an acute stress and turn it into a chronic one. They're trying to manage the stress continuously. What they mean by that is, instead of getting better at handling a tough stress, is they lessen the intensity of the stress. So instead of 8 times up, they try to fall less. So instead of asking for stronger shoulders, they ask for a lesser weight. So what they do is they take a very intense workout, again, warm up a long time for it, get into it with already elevated heart rate, and try to make the workout the least painful possible, which of course by definition is not possible.
Makes a lot of sense.
And that's not the point. The point is actually to go into workout and handle the stress as it comes, because that's how you're going to build resilience. And we are more and more avoiding that. So CrossFit used to be friend with the stuff at the seminar, very short workout, very hard, Helen under 8 minutes, all that stuff. You just blasted 400-meter sprints, go as hard as you can and try to survive after that. And then we turn it into 20-minute workout, 40-minute workout. So what you see is we're trying to go toward the chronic side of everything.
Yeah. Well, with the burn the questions, like there's not really a warm up. You start with row pulls, and then that's just.
But even I can do burn the question on the sled. Just take the sled, go, and we'll talk about that some more. But that idea of continuously warming up, continuously being ready. You know, people leave work and then they have to do this, and then they have to warm up for an hour to be ready for the workout. I'm like, all right, but the problem with this is, and you have to look at it from a pure evolutionary function, is you don't get to warm up for a fight.
Yeah.
You don't fight when
Yeah.
you want. You fight when that dude over there
Yeah.
wants.
Yeah, no, and besides that, for the let's call it mental aspect of it, even for the physical part, like I always had a very clear idea about warming up for sprinting, which now is really changing. Like I always used to like doing very long warm up, but the reality is if you need to sprint in. Most of the people that I'm teaching are sprinting to be better in their day-to-day life. No one is sprinting when it's necessary and can do a 30-minute warm-up before. Like
Or
most
anything
people
else.
need to be sprinting to, grab the kid or whatever it is. But anyway, so it is important
we see
to not to
we,
suit that.
we see that everywhere. That's the problem. For example, is warming up for a workout. Again, like you will never warm up in nature. It's like, yeah, but I sit so long and everything. It's like, right. So, but this conversation is about anxiety. And if you see the base of anxiety, what you hear the most out of people is, I don't feel ready. That's what you hear out of anxious people. And the PTSD is, I wasn't ready for what happened. So PTSD is, I wasn't ready for what happened at that moment, what happened to me. I wasn't ready for that. And I don't feel ready for the next one. And that's where, so anytime they hear a noise, it puts them into a complete panic attack because they're not ready.
Yeah.
And people that have that continuous anxiety, we're going to talk about it, is also they never feel ready. But of course you never feel ready because you're always in a chronic state. You always try to take the acute and turn it into a chronic, nice, manageable thing. So it's a very managerial way of looking at life. I'm going to manage life. I'm going to take my environment and make it as comfortable as it can. Except turns out life is not like that. And then the acute has to be necessary. And even if you can control, you cannot, but let's say you can control your life in every way and make it comfortable. You cannot change your biology. You cannot change that. Evolutionary speaking, we have a system designed for acute. Why? Because that's how predators come at you. They don't come at you when you're ready. It doesn't matter. The predator comes, you have to be ready in a quarter of a second and go into that thing. We are not capable of doing that anymore because we constantly look for the chronic instead of the acute. So, somatically speaking, it means what? It means we need to train the heart to take a heavy load towards strength. Sorry. So I'll explain that in the next podcast because I've been playing with that for 4 weeks with my own training. The sandbag on the beach being all that. I'll explain exactly my approach to that. But the point is we're going to make the heart stronger because somatically speaking, it's the first two hierarchies and they're going to lead toward everything else. If the first two hierarchies are already failing, then how can anything... It's the base of the pyramid. It's the heart, the signal of the heart decides how the body does everything else. Well, necessarily, like you can live without a brain, you cannot live without a heart. Like people are brain dead, they keep breathing. They cannot feed themselves, so they die of starvation, obviously, but they can still breathe. Without the heart, there's nothing.
That's so interesting.
Right, so that signal, somatically speaking, that bottom up is the heart. The first two hierarchies, and that second hierarchy is the one I'm talking about, the one that decides the strength of the heart. That's going to be what matters. So how do we train that? And that'll be my next podcast. Because there is that somatic version, but there's also the cognitive part of all that, which actually relates to the same thing. I worked a lot with that during the study, and in France and other places. Like so, because lately, really, it's been really working a lot toward anxiety. And cognitively speaking, we see the same issue. We see a drive of the acute toward the chronic. And I made I think I made a mistake when I labeled anxiety as a driver because it's always about the future. I'm not ready. I think that was a mistake because I don't think the driver is anxiety. I think the driver is frustration. And I think anxiety is a broken driver. What do I mean by that? Frustration is seen negatively, but really it is the most important human emotion that we have. Nothing moves people like frustration. Frustration is the only thing that allows to set objectives over the long term and get to it every morning. People talk about motivation, inspired, discipline. All of that comes from you being frustrated about not being as good as you think you can be. Frustration is that base of the pyramid, that feeling that allows you to go, I need to get better. This is what makes you go in jiu-jitsu, getting your ass kicked and tapping 3 times a session and coming back. It's not discipline. It's eventually it turns into discipline of that, but it starts first at that frustration of not being who you want to be.
So then why do we always associate frustration with a negative thing?
Because it's so acute. It's the most acute feeling that you have out there. This is the one when you take the controller and throw it against the wall because you die against the boss 12 times in a row, 20 times in a row, but the frustration keeps going up. There's no leveling up. The more you fail, the more frustrated you feel until you lose your shit. So that means that at some point or another, when you're not who you are, the acute sense of failure will be too much. And so you're like, fuck that. And so to avoid that in a culture that tells you that everything has to be chronic, has to be comfortable, you'll start first blaming others and then finding a reason to quit.
So
It's seen as a negative because it's such a harsh, acute feeling in a society that does everything it can to turn people from acute toward chronic.
yeah. So in a way,
We got soft mentally as much as physically. That's
Yeah.
the bottom line.
so in a way, like negative emotions are not per se bad.
No. They're never bad anyway.
Yeah.
Negative emotions, anger, and all of that are necessary. But I don't even put frustration in the negative emotion
Yeah,
part.
exactly.
I put it in the positive. You just don't know how to deal with it. This is like there is a type of pain in training. Most people will tell you like, oh, that's bad. No, it's not bad. It's good. It makes you better. It makes you more resilient. It makes you stronger. There's nothing wrong with that type of pain, and you have to learn to enjoy it, like we all do in the strength world.
Yeah.
You like to enjoy that feeling that is so uncomfortable
Yeah.
because it is so acute. Intensity is always uncomfortable if you go high enough.
True.
So that's the same thing for frustration. The reason people put it as a negative is because that's how you sell things to people. You create frustration and you provide a solution. There are no solutions, only trade-offs.
Well, that's-
People never understand that part.
That's the whole marketing idea behind TikTok.
Always. Create frustration, provide a
then,
solution.
yeah,
Right?
that's why it works
Provide
so
a
well.
release. So do we look at frustration in a way like the whole you know how they sell they basically it's porn. That's how they sell things. They create a little bit of a frustration and then they create a release. So they put you that girl you're never gonna have in a situation you're never gonna be with a sexual competence you're never gonna have, and then they make you very excited and they give just a little bit, not that much because the girl isn't real, but just enough to excite you. Then they provide a release. And you see that on the app now. They just show you those videos that are very short and people get to the end. So it's no, Kitty, not on the microphone, please. I love you, but right now, don't rub on the microphone. This is what society does. It sells the same way we sell porn. We create a little bit of frustration and then we
Yeah.
provide a solution. The solution is complete bullshit, but it doesn't matter. So
That's where the addiction is. You
Yes.
see a lot of people these days addicted to porn, right?
no, they're not. It's complete bullshit. They just can't find it anywhere else. That's all. Because they're lonely. Because most men between the age of between 18 and 30 did not have an interaction with a woman this year. It's
Wow.
50. It's over 50%.
That's crazy.
Most young men are single and have no desire to have interaction, everything. So it's not porn addiction. It's just the whole man-women thing is in a disastrous place.
True.
That's all.
So-
So it has nothing to do with porn addiction. So, but the point is we are continuously told that frustration is a negative and it's wrong. It's the most important emotion that exists, and it's the only emotion that will allow you to build toward your objective the way you want to. You don't build a life. Only frustration will allow you to build an entire life.
True.
But so what happens when frustration is too acute and you do not like the feeling. So first you find someone to blame.
Yeah,
But no
that I
matter
wanna
what,
go into a
what
little
you're
bit.
doing is you're taking that acute feeling and turning it into a chronic one. So that's what I mean. And then once it becomes chronic, once that voice that was too loud is in a now at a sound level that is manageable, it turns into anxiety. So
Yeah.
I think anxiety is broken frustration. No, sorry, my cat keeps bumping into the microphone.
And it's impossible to kick this cat out because she is basically Jillian's first and only love. Like
No, she's
there
not my
is
only love, but the cat matters. Let's put it this way.
okay,
Kitty
so
matters.
priorities of women in the house. Kitty, Yaya,
That's not
me.
true. That's
That's the way it
absolutely
is, and I
that's absolutely not true. You're a tie with Yaya. Kitty's first. That's true.
did you just tie your child with me? That's unacceptable.
Well, I
The
kind
kid
of
comes first. I'm sorry. She
no.
was
I
no,
have to keep the pieces. So anyway,
no. I
so
disagree with that.
let's go back to the
Anyway,
podcast, please. The so I don't lose my train of thought. So the well, massive problem that we see is an incapacity of people to handle a deep frustration, so a very acute feeling, and so they lower the sound of it. They lower the sound of it until the requirement of an action is not present anymore. And by doing that, they create a broken driver. They dilute the thing. They turn an espresso and they turn it into an Americano. So they just keep pouring water until the taste is not too strong anymore. But by doing that, they remove the necessity of an action, right? Because that's what that threshold is a moment where you're going to have to physically do something about it. Where the level of stress created by the acute frustration turns into almost a somatic way where, okay, I have to take an action because I just can't take it anymore. So instead of that, you lower it right below that threshold, and now you have simply a very uncomfortable noise in the back right there, but you can take it. And that is what anxiety is. It's that constant feeling of I'm not ready. I live in my head. I'm only thinking. I'm constantly thinking about it, asking questions to myself and everything. It's like, yeah, because you're doing all that at a low level frustration, basically. Because
yeah.
you have to understand that what frustration is. Frustration is to allow you to solve the problem of your environment.
And instead of solving it, trying to find a way to absorb it or like endure it.
Right. It's yeah. You're enjoying it. It's a neighbor's dog that keeps barking. There's nothing you can do about it. So instead of going to the point you're so frustrated, you go and you talk to the owner, or you force him to control that.
Or you buy a BB gun.
Exactly. Or at some point you see you just quit and learn to handle the noise of the dog. But that's not going to change the fact that now you're going to be annoyed all the time. You just won't be annoyed enough to actually go confront the neighbor. But the dog is still barking. So you haven't changed anything. And so that feeling is actually, that frustration is going to grow more because it's going to keep annoying you, and every time now you're going to know it's coming, it's going to annoy you even more, but you're less and less ready to take an action toward it. So you could see how that that broken driver, that broken frustration could turn into a feeling that grows into that very uncomfortable feeling and yet never associated with an action. So you do that for years and you would get a feeling quite high of a broken driver, which therefore will not push you to change your life and yet makes you horribly uncomfortable, but not enough to take an action. This is what you saw during the pandemic, the number of people that say, oh, the pandemic helped me. Yeah, because you had not done what was necessary to fix the problems in your lives, and it make you feel like shit and completely unready, and yet not taking any action toward it, but the government did. So you felt better because someone fixed the environment for you.
Yeah,
So you thought your anxiety went away. But if frustration is there, then anxiety can never go away, since anxiety is just a broken driver, just a broken frustration. So you feel better for a while because you just did not feel as bad. But the problems remain the same. The second the life goes back to normal, that's why a lot of people didn't want to go back to their normal life, because they didn't want to have to face the same problem they didn't want to solve in the first place.
True.
So anxiety is a broken driver.
So
It's frustration at a level low enough that it doesn't make you do anything anymore. You dilute it over time, which means it lasts forever, and it will never be solved because you will never take an action anymore. And by the way, this is the SSRIs. This is the
yeah,
nature of the antidepressants, where they make you accept, they make you not jump. So they make you accept your shitty life, but not jump. The problem is, all the people that jumped and survived all said the same. The second they let go of their hands, they all thought, I don't want to die.
yeah,
They just needed to jump to realize that, because that was the moment where they took an action.
an action towards it.
And what saved them was taking an action, jumping, because at least finally there was an action.
Yeah.
The wrong one, but yet an action. So that was usually their path toward doing better, or they don't miss the second.
Yeah.
But at least it's an action. So that's the problem with anxiety. It is designed, it is supposed to be frustration, but it's shown as negative because of the society, honestly, that right now is based on us being soft.
So I wanted to go a little bit in. You mentioned very briefly, it's like blaming others, and in a way the importance of accountability and why it's actually not, therefore not bad to blame yourself, or not blame yourself, but to tell yourself like this I did bad, or this.
Well, okay,
Like
so frustration is, to me, is the greatest emotion because it's the one that leads to the most actions.
Yeah.
Right, so therefore, anything that will stop you from taking an action toward your own life is not good. So blaming
Interesting.
others is not good. Why? Because it allows you to put the onus of the action on others instead of you.
Yeah.
Or, like you go shoot the owner or the dog.
Yeah.
Right. So you go like, I blame you because it's your dog. Yes, but you still have to take an action toward the dog. Otherwise, you stay at home bitching about it and everything. It's like, yes, but that's not changing the reality of the situation that the dog is barking. So you get to bitch about the guy all you want. It lowers the acuteness of the feeling. It doesn't
Gives
solve,
you a release. Yeah.
but it doesn't solve the problem. So that's why anxiety is porn. It's the porn version of life. Anxiety is to frustration what porn is to sex.
Interesting.
It's a convenient way to deal with the biological reality and with the reality of your life.
Yeah.
So you can, porn is anxiety, frustration is sex,
Interesting.
in that sense. And reality is in frustration, sex. So for example, porn, you don't have to go and
Talk to the girl.
talk to the girl.
and-
You don't have to make her like you. You don't have, by the way, you don't have to build an entire life so that beautiful girls will like you. There's a number of things. You could see
Yeah,
how
well,
young boys going toward that. Yeah, because why would I, when I can just do OnlyFans, I can just go on OnlyFans or shit like that, and I still get to see those girls. Is it yes, but you don't get to share the experience. You don't get the reality of the experience. And that's what anxiety is. Anxiety is robbing you of the reality of frustration that would make you take action and change the environment that you so desire to change.
Yeah. So could you then also be too far the other way, where the dog barks one time, you just move there and you're over there shooting
of
the
course.
dog with a BB gun? What would that then?
Yeah, then you're a psychopath. Right.
Yeah.
But those people don't have anxiety, which is what I'm talking
Interesting.
about. They have
Yeah.
frustration. They don't have anxiety. They take action too fast.
Yeah.
So what they have is no impulse control.
Oh, interesting.
So, and usually they have no impulse control because they have no resilience toward impulse control, which means most of the times, if they don't react like that, they don't react at all. This is why they go shoot the BB gun on the first park. Is because they're not going to wait for day 3 and go talk normally to the owner and try to find a solution. Since they cannot do that, then they start shooting. But it still comes back to the same thing. It's usually starts with an anxiety, uncontrollable, that turns into low impulse control. But low impulse control is a lack of resilience toward impulse control.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Wow.
It's when things become a 0 or 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then any extreme is always.
But it doesn't.
dysfunctional.
But it never starts there, unless you're a complete psychopath in the beginning. It doesn't start there. It usually starts within with anxiety because you were never dealing with the situation.
Yeah.
So somatically or cognitively, we see the same thing. We see a lack of resilience toward the strength of the heart, toward the capacity to deal with an acute feeling. When people start to feel their heart pounding in their chest, that's when they freak out. It's physical anxiety. They go, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. I can't do it. No, you just took your heart to a place, where you can accept the heart beating fast, but you cannot accept the heart beating hard because of very specific things. That's what I want to measure. That's going to be part of the study and everything. But I think the root of PTSD is there somatically, is in the strength of the heart. And the root of the solution to anxiety, on a cognitive sense, the root is going to be the strength of your willpower, in the sense of your capacity to absorb frustration and turn it into action.
Yeah.
Because in a way, frustration is just energy being created. It just doesn't feel good. But who cares as long as it's effective?
And let's say you have like some type of inflammatory issue or disease or whatever.
Somatic.
So how are those things separated when it comes to?
Well, it depends on the disease that you would have.
No, I understand that point. I'm just saying that on the frustration concept, right?
So if you have a disease, that's somatically. So is that disease affecting your heart?
Okay.
Right. But cognitively is different, even though they're going to mesh together, because some disease will affect, for example, the heart, and therefore affect the brain as well, because there's a direct line between the heart and the brain. So a disease is not on the cognitive side.
Yeah.
It will get there, obviously.
Yeah, that's what
but for the framework that I was referring to, that's why I've said I'm going to oversimplify it. I'm going to put it in two different ones. I'm going to put one toward the somatic, put one toward the cognitive.
Yeah.
A physical disease is necessarily on the somatic side. So for the framework, I'm going to go, what is that disease relating to the heart? What problem is it creating? And then we'll see how that affects cognitively. But first, we're going to establish the base, somatically speaking, so that we can establish a base and then build upon that. But then that will depend so much on the disease itself that I can't give you an answer on how we do that.
Yeah.
Because it depends.
No, it was also a very oversimplified question.
Well, no, the problem is just there is no other answer than it depends.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm just talking framework so that we can have boxes, like somatic, cognitive, chronic, acute. After that disease, where does it fit? On the somatic, chronic, is it an acute disease? Is more like a chronic problem, like type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, because now you're talking toward chronic somatic. What does it do cognitively? It will lead to major depression disorder. We know all that. But now we're getting into the weeds where I cannot give an answer without having a specific understanding of what is it we're talking about. Nothing, I can only oversimplify the framework. I cannot do it. Once we go into disease, now we're beginning to be specific. I cannot do that anymore. Then it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. This is just for a framework. So I have the 4 boxes: somatic, cognitive, acute, chronic, and we're going to go heart on one side and frustration on the other, just so I can frame the conversation and stuff like that.
No,
right?
100%.
Because if we start to talk about frustration, we start to talk about stress hormones. So now we're getting into the somatic. The breathing is in all this. So again, and then obviously the breathing and the heart are linked. So at the end, it's all linked together. But if I start to put everything together, there is no conversation. Because then it's like, well, it depends, and then we're in a 6-hour conversation about which disease we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm just trying to start from a simple point, and that will build complexity as we go. But I cannot go directly into a complex point, because then the oversimplification doesn't work anymore. Because then the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the next podcast will be on the training itself, and the one after that will go cognitive, and I want to go into carbs and something I noticed with trigger for panic attacks with carbohydrates and all of that. But this will be a set of podcasts, obviously, so I can go at all of that. But I wanted to establish the framework first, and then I'll explain how we're going to use the workouts for the somatic, the heart, on the next podcast.
I'm really excited also to do the podcast on the carbs and everything
Yeah,
because I think it's very, very interesting.
yeah, yeah. There's some cool stuff coming up. But anyway, this is a framework, and then for the workout, it'll be next week. See you guys.
Bye, guys.